Welcome back to Crowned Black Heroes, where we uncover the extraordinary stories that changed history but were deliberately hidden from you. Today, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind. Everyone knows the name Harriet Tubman. You learned about her in school. You've seen her face, heard that she escaped slavery and helped others escape through the Underground Railroad. But I guarantee you don't know the full story, because what they don't teach you in school, what they conveniently leave out of the textbooks, is that Harriet Tubman wasn't just a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She was a military strategist, a spy, and a combat leader who planned and executed one of the most daring military operations of the Civil War. On the night of June 2, 1863, Harriet Tubman led a military raid deep into Confederate territory that liberated over 750 enslaved people in a single night. 750 people in one operation. And she did it while dodging Confederate bullets, navigating treacherous rivers, and outsmarting an entire Confederate military infrastructure. This formerly enslaved woman became the first woman in American history to lead a military assault, and for over a century, this achievement was erased, minimized, and forgotten. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we bring you these powerful untold stories every single week. And if this story makes you angry that you weren't taught the full truth about Harriet Tubman, if it makes you want to shout about this incredible woman's military genius, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think. Now let me tell you the real story of Harriet Tubman, the story they didn't want you to know. We begin not on that dramatic night in 1863 but decades earlier, because to understand what Harriet accomplished, you need to understand where she came from and what she overcame. Araminta Ross, who will later take the name Harriet Tubman, is born into slavery around 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland. The exact date is unknown because enslaved people's births are not considered worth recording. Her parents, Harriet Green and Ben Ross, are enslaved on different plantations owned by different members of the same white family. Araminta, called Minty as a child, grows up in the brutal world of Eastern Shore, Maryland slavery. She's put to work as young as 5 or 6 years old, first in the master's house and then in the fields. The work is backbreaking. The punishments are savage. Minty witnesses family members being sold away, disappearing forever. She sees people whipped until their backs are masses of scar tissue. She experiences violence herself that will affect her for the rest of her life. When Minty is about 12 or 13 years old, she's in a store when an enslaved man attempts to run away. The overseer demands that Minty help restrain the man. Minty refuses. The overseer picks up a 2-pound iron weight and hurls it at the escaping man. The weight misses him and strikes Minty in the head, fracturing her skull. She nearly dies. For months, she's incapacitated, unable to work. She eventually recovers, but the injury leaves her with a condition that today would probably be diagnosed as temporal lobe epilepsy. For the rest of her life, Minty experiences sudden sleeping spells where she falls into a deep sleep without warning, sometimes in the middle of conversations or activities. She also experiences vivid visions and dreams that she interprets as messages from God. In a lesser person, this injury might be disabling. But Minty, who is extraordinarily strong-willed and determined, learns to manage her condition and even uses the visions as a source of spiritual strength and guidance. In 1844, Araminta marries John Tubman, a free black man, and begins using her mother's name, Harriet. But Harriet herself remains enslaved. Her marriage to a free man doesn't change her legal status. She's still property, still subject to being sold at any moment. And in 1849, that moment comes. The man who owns Harriet dies, and his estate begins selling off enslaved people to settle debts. Harriet knows she's about to be sold south, probably to the cotton plantations of the Deep South, where conditions are even more brutal and where she'll never see her family again. She makes a decision that will change her life and eventually change American history. She's going to escape. On a September night in 1849, Harriet Tubman escapes from slavery. She doesn't have a map. She doesn't have money. She doesn't have a clear plan beyond heading north toward Pennsylvania, a free state. She travels at night, following the North Star, hiding during the day. She makes contact with people involved in the Underground Railroad, the network of safe houses, and sympathetic individuals who help escaping slaves reach freedom. The journey is approximately 90 miles from Maryland to Pennsylvania, and every step is dangerous. If caught, Harriet will be severely punished, possibly killed. But Harriet has something that makes her nearly unstoppable, an absolute, unshakable determination to be free. After weeks of dangerous travel, Harriet crosses the border into Pennsylvania. She's free. She later describes the moment, saying, "When I found I had crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven." But Harriet's freedom is incomplete. Her family is still enslaved. Her brothers, her sister, her parents, all still in bondage. And Harriet makes a decision that most people would consider insane. She's going to go back. She's going to return to slave territory and bring her family out. Over the next decade, from 1850 to 1860, Harriet Tubman makes approximately 13 trips back into slave territory. She becomes a conductor on the Underground Railroad, personally leading approximately 70 people to freedom, including her parents and several of her siblings. Think about the courage this requires. Every time Harriet goes south, she's risking her life. Maryland has passed laws making it a crime to help escape slaves, with severe penalties. Slave catchers and bounty hunters are actively looking for runaways. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 means that even in free states, escaped slaves can be captured and returned to slavery. Harriet is one of the most wanted fugitives in Maryland. There are rewards offered for her capture, dead or alive. Some sources say the cumulative rewards for Harriet eventually reach $40,000, an enormous sum in the 1850s. Yet Harriet keeps going back, keeps rescuing people, keeps outwitting the slave catchers and patrols. She develops a reputation for being nearly supernatural. People call her Moses because, like the biblical Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, Harriet is leading her people out of bondage. Harriet's success rate is perfect. She never loses a passenger, never has anyone captured on her watch. Part of this is careful planning. Harriet scouts routes, establishes networks of safe houses, gathers intelligence about patrols and dangers. Part of it is her absolute authority and discipline. When people on her expeditions get scared and want to turn back, potentially endangering everyone, Harriet pulls out a pistol and makes it clear that they're going forward to freedom or they're dying right there. There's no turning back. No one will be allowed to endanger the group by returning and potentially revealing information under torture. But Harriet's methods are also creative and strategic. She starts escapes on Saturday nights because newspapers don't publish on Sundays, meaning runaway notices won't appear until Monday, giving them a head start. She uses various disguises, sometimes dressing as a man, sometimes as an old woman. She carries drugs to keep babies quiet so their crying won't alert patrols. She uses her visions and her deep knowledge of nature to navigate and to sense danger. People who travel with Harriet describe her as fearless, resourceful, and absolutely committed. By 1860, when the Civil War breaks out, Harriet Tubman is already a legend in abolitionist circles. Frederick Douglass knows her and writes admiringly of her courage. John Brown consults with her before his raid on Harper's Ferry. White abolitionists provide financial support for her work, but most of white America, particularly in the South, sees Harriet as a dangerous criminal, a threat to the institution of slavery. And when the Civil War begins, Harriet sees an opportunity not just to free individual enslaved people, but to strike at slavery as a system. She travels to South Carolina in 1862, where Union forces have captured the Sea Islands and parts of the coastal low country. The area is still dangerous, with Confederate forces nearby and Confederate sympathizers throughout the region. Harriet offers her services to the Union Army, and they quickly realize what an asset she is. Harriet knows the South intimately. She understands how plantations operate, how enslaved people communicate, how to move through difficult terrain. She speaks the language and knows the culture, and crucially, she has something that white Union officers don't have: the ability to gather intelligence from enslaved people in Confederate territory. Enslaved people won't talk to white Union soldiers because they don't trust them and fear it might be a trap, but they'll talk to Harriet Tubman. They know who she is, they trust her. Harriet becomes a spy for the Union Army. She recruits a network of scouts, mostly formerly enslaved men. who know the local area, and she begins gathering military intelligence. She maps Confederate fortifications, identifies supply routes, reports on troop movements. She learns where torpedoes, the Civil War term for mines, have been placed in rivers. She gathers information about which plantations have supplies that could be seized or destroyed. She identifies enslaved people who want to escape and join Union forces. This intelligence work is dangerous beyond measure. If Harriet is caught by Confederates, she won't be treated as a prisoner of war. She'll be tortured and executed as a spy and a runaway slave. But Harriet operates with the same fearless determination she showed on the Underground Railroad. And in early 1863, Harriet brings a plan to Colonel James Montgomery, commander of the 2nd South Carolina Volunteers, a regiment of black soldiers. Harriet has intelligence about Confederate supply operations along the Combahee River in South Carolina. She knows where supplies are stored, where Confederate troops are stationed, and where large numbers of enslaved people are being held on plantations. She proposes a raid, not a small operation, but a major military assault that will accomplish multiple objectives: destroy Confederate supplies, disrupt Confederate operations, and liberate hundreds of enslaved people who can then join Union forces as soldiers or support personnel. Colonel Montgomery is intrigued. The plan is audacious, maybe too audacious, but Harriet has proven herself reliable. Her intelligence has been consistently accurate, and the potential payoff is enormous. Montgomery agrees. The raid is planned for early June 1863. On the night of June 1st, going into June 2nd, the operation begins. 3 Union gunboats, the Harriet A, Weed, the John Adams, and the Sentinel, steam up the Combahee River carrying 300 soldiers from the 2nd South Carolina Volunteers. And on the lead boat, guiding the entire operation, is Harriet Tubman. This is unprecedented. A black woman, a formerly enslaved person, is leading a military operation. She's not just observing or advising. She's in command, directing where the boats should go, identifying targets, making tactical decisions in real time. As the boats move up the river in darkness, Harriet's intelligence proves perfect. She knows where the Confederate torpedoes are placed, and she guides the boats safely around them. A single torpedo explosion could sink a gunboat and kill dozens of soldiers, but Harriet's knowledge keeps them safe. The boats reach the first target plantations. Soldiers go ashore and begin destroying Confederate supplies and infrastructure. They burn storehouses filled with rice and cotton that the Confederacy needs. They destroy equipment. They set fire to buildings. Confederate forces in the area are caught completely off guard. They didn't expect a Union raid this far up the river. They scramble to respond, but they're outnumbered and disorganized. Some Confederate troops fire on the Union forces, and there are exchanges of gunfire, but the Union assault is too well coordinated. The soldiers of the 2nd South Carolina, formerly enslaved men fighting for their freedom and the freedom of others, fight with extraordinary determination. They're not just soldiers following orders, they're liberators. And then the most extraordinary part of the operation begins. As the Union forces move through the plantations, Harriet and the soldiers spread the word that freedom has come. Enslaved people who have been working these plantations, who have lived their entire lives in bondage, suddenly see Union soldiers and Harriet Tubman calling them to freedom. At first, some are hesitant. Is this real? Is this a trap? Enslaved people have learned through bitter experience not to trust promises. But Harriet is there, and her presence is proof. This is real. This is their moment. And they come. By the dozens, by the hundreds, they come. Men and women and children, some carrying belongings, some carrying nothing, all moving toward the river, toward the boats, toward freedom. They're running through fields, wading through marshes, desperate to reach the Union boats before Confederate forces can reorganize and stop them. Harriet is directing this massive evacuation, helping people onto the boats, keeping order in the chaos. Some of the people escaping are elderly, some are children, some are carrying infants. The boats are being loaded far beyond their safe capacity, but there's no time to worry about that. Every person who doesn't make it onto the boats will be recaptured and probably killed as an example to others. The Confederate forces are trying to stop the evacuation. There's gunfire. Some enslaved people are shot as they run toward freedom, but the majority make it. Boat after boat fills with liberated people. When the boats can't hold any more safely, Harriet makes the call to withdraw. The Boats turn and head back down the Combahee River, loaded with supplies seized from Confederate plantations and with over 750 human beings who were enslaved when the sun set and are free as it rises. The withdrawal is tense. The boats are dangerously overloaded. Confederate forces are alert now and trying to cut off the escape. But Harriet's knowledge of the river, her ability to navigate around the torpedoes, and the determination of the soldiers of the 2nd South Carolina get everyone to safety. When they reach Union lines and the liberated people disembark, the scale of what's been accomplished becomes clear. Over 750 people freed in a single night. This is the largest liberation of enslaved people in American history. It's a military victory, a propaganda coup, and a humanitarian triumph all at once. The freed people include men of military age who immediately volunteer to join Union forces. The raid has dealt a significant blow to Confederate supply operations in the region, and it has proven that black soldiers led by a black woman can execute complex military operations successfully. The Union Army is thrilled. Colonel Montgomery writes reports praising the operation's success and specifically crediting Harriet Tubman's intelligence and leadership. He writes that Harriet was invaluable, that the operation would not have succeeded without her. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton hears about the raid and is impressed. There's talk of Harriet receiving official recognition, maybe even a military commission. But Harriet is a black woman in 1863 America. Despite her achievement, despite her proven military genius, the recognition doesn't come. The newspapers cover the raid. Some mention Harriet, referring to her as a black woman or simply as a scout. But many reports credit only the white officers, erasing Harriet from the story of her own operation. This is the beginning of the historical erasure that will continue for over a century. Harriet continues to work for the Union Army for the remainder of the war. She serves as a nurse, treating wounded soldiers. She continues to gather intelligence. She advocates for fair treatment of black soldiers, who are paid less than white soldiers and often given the most dangerous assignments. When the war ends in 1865 and slavery is abolished, Harriet has spent 4 years in service to the Union. She's risked her life countless times. She's led the most successful liberation operation of the war, and her compensation is essentially nothing. The Union Army never formally paid Harriet for her service as a spy and scout. She received small payments as a nurse, but nothing commensurate with her contributions. After the war, Harriet returns to Auburn, New York, where she had purchased a small farm before the war. She's in her 40s now, in poor health from years of hard living and from the effects of her head injury. She's also caring for her elderly parents, and she's broke. Despite everything she's done, despite her service and sacrifice, Harriet has no financial security. She applies for a military pension based on her service during the war. Her application is supported by testimonials from officers she served with, including Colonel Montgomery. But the pension application is denied. The government claims there's insufficient documentation of her service. This is absurd. There are written reports from Union officers. There are witnesses, but Harriet is a black woman, and the government is not inclined to pay her. For years, Harriet struggles financially. She supports herself by farming, by selling vegetables, by taking in boarders. She's known in Auburn as the woman who was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, but few people know about her military service. In 1869, a biography of Harriet is published, written by Sarah Bradford. The book, Scenes in the Life of Harriet. Tubman tells Harriet's story and helps publicize her achievements. But the book also contains some exaggerations and errors that will complicate Harriet's historical record. The book claims Harriet made 19 trips on the Underground Railroad and freed 300 people. These numbers are higher than what historians now believe is accurate. Harriet herself probably inflated the numbers when talking to Bradford, perhaps to make the story more dramatic, or perhaps because after so many years and so many rescues, the exact count was unclear. Whatever the reason, these inflated numbers become part of Harriet's legend, and later, when historians try to verify them and can't, some people wrongly conclude that all of Harriet's achievements have been exaggerated. The book does help Harriet financially. Bradford donates the proceeds to Harriet, providing some much-needed income. But it's not enough. Harriet continues to struggle. In 1874, Harriet marries Nelson Davis, a former slave and Union Army veteran who is much younger than her. They have a loving marriage, but Nelson is also in poor health from his war service, and they struggle together financially. Through the 1880s and 90s, Harriet continues to apply for a military pension. Her applications are repeatedly denied. Finally, in 1892, after decades of effort, Harriet is granted a pension. But it's not for her own military service, it's as the widow of Nelson Davis, who died in 1888. Harriet receives $8 per month as a veteran's widow. This is insulting. Harriet's own service, her own military achievements, are not recognized. She's only compensated because she was married to a man who served. In 1900, after more advocacy, Harriet's pension is increased to $20 per month, and the government finally acknowledges her own military service. But even this is inadequate compensation for what she accomplished. Harriet lives her final years in Auburn, still active in her community despite her advancing age and poor health. She's involved in the women's suffrage movement, speaking at meetings and advocating for women's right to vote. She works with the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church to establish a home for elderly and indigent black people, recognizing that many formerly enslaved people have no support in their old age. In 1908, she opens the Harriet Tubman Home for the aged on land adjacent to her own property. She spends her final years there, cared for by the institution she founded. Harriet Tubman dies on March 10, 1913, at approximately 90 years old. Her funeral is attended by local officials and community members, both black and white. She's buried with military honors, her coffin draped in an American flag, recognizing at last in death the service she gave in life. But even as Harriet is being memorialized locally, the larger historical record is already erasing her military achievements. History books discussing the Civil War focus on major battles and famous generals, all of them white men. When the Underground Railroad is discussed, Harriet is mentioned, but often her role is minimized or romanticized without conveying the actual danger and strategic brilliance of her work. And the Combahee River Raid, her greatest military achievement, is either not mentioned at all or is described as a raid led by Colonel Montgomery, with Harriet as merely a scout or guide. The fact that Harriet planned the operation, that she provided the intelligence, that she guided the boats, that she directed the evacuation, all of this is erased. This erasure continues for decades. Through the early and mid-20th century, Harriet Tubman is remembered, if at all, as the nice lady who helped some slaves escape. Children's books present her as a kind of fairy tale figure, brave but not particularly strategic or intelligent. The militarism, the violence, the hard tactical decisions that Harriet made, all of that is sanitized away, and her military service during the Civil War is almost completely forgotten. This erasure serves a purpose. If Harriet Tubman is just a folk hero, a sympathetic figure who helped some people, she's not threatening. She can be celebrated in a limited way without challenging fundamental narratives about race and gender in America. But if Harriet Tubman is recognized as a military strategist, as a combat leader, as someone who commanded soldiers in battle and executed the largest slave liberation in American history, that's a very different story. That forces recognition that a black woman had capabilities that exceeded those of most white male officers. That challenges assumptions about leadership and intelligence and courage. So the easier thing to do is simply not talk about it, to focus on the Underground Railroad and ignore the military service, to keep Harriet in a comfortable box where she's inspiring but not threatening. In the late 20th century, historians begin to recover the full scope of Harriet's military service. Books and articles are published documenting the Combahee River Raid and Harriet's central role in it. Scholars like Kate Clifford Larson write detailed biographies based on primary sources, showing conclusively that Harriet was not just a guide but a military leader. The historical record is corrected, at least in academic circles. In 2003, the Harriet Tubman National Historical Park is established in Auburn, New York, preserving her home and telling her full story. In 2016, the US Treasury announces plans to put Harriet Tubman's face on the $20 bill, though as of 2025, this has not yet been implemented. Schools and institutions are named after Harriet. Her story is taught more completely, including her military service. But even now, even with all this recognition, most Americans don't know the full story. Ask a random person about Harriet Tubman, and they'll probably tell you she helped slaves escape. Very few will be able to tell you about the Combahee River Raid. Very few will know that she was a Union Army spy and a military leader. The sanitized version of Harriet's story persists because it's easier, because it's less challenging, because recognizing Harriet as a military genius requires rethinking assumptions about black women's capabilities. So why does this matter? Why is it important to tell the full story of Harriet Tubman, including her military service? For several reasons. First, it's simply historical truth. Harriet did these things. She earned these achievements. She deserves full recognition. Telling a partial story, even if it's positive, is a form of disrespect. It suggests that Harriet's actual accomplishments need to be softened or simplified for modern audiences. Second, Harriet's military achievements demonstrate capabilities that challenge multiple forms of prejudice. She was a black woman leading military operations in 1863. She was making tactical decisions that white male officers respected and relied on. She was executing complex operations successfully. This proves unambiguously that the limitations placed on black people and on women were never about inherent capability, but always about systemic oppression. If Harriet Tubman could do what she did in 1863 with minimal resources and maximum obstacles, what might black women achieve in a truly equal society? Third, Harriet's story offers a more complete and realistic model of black resistance to slavery. The Underground Railroad was important, but it freed people one small group at a time. The Combahee River Raid freed 750 people in one night. That's revolutionary action, not just individual escape. That's striking at slavery as a system, not just helping individuals. That's military strategy being used to advance liberation. Young people, particularly young black people, need to know that resistance to oppression has taken many forms, including armed resistance and military action. Fourth, Harriet's erasure reveals how historical narratives are constructed and whose achievements are remembered. Harriet wasn't forgotten because documentation didn't exist. Union officers wrote reports praising her. There were newspaper accounts. Witnesses testified to her role. She was erased because historians and educators made choices about whose stories to tell and whose to minimize. Those choices reflected the racial and gender biases of the people making them. Recovering Harriet's full story means interrogating how history is written and committing to more complete, honest narratives. Fifth, Harriet's life demonstrates that excellence and moral courage can coexist with strategic thinking and even violence when necessary. Harriet carried a gun on the Underground Railroad and was willing to use it to prevent people from turning back and endangering the group. She planned and led military raids that involved combat and killing. This doesn't diminish her moral stature. It shows that she understood that fighting oppression sometimes requires force, requires making hard decisions, requires being willing to do difficult things. This is a more mature and realistic understanding of resistance than the sanitized versions often presented. Before I close, I want you to understand the magnitude of what Harriet Tubman accomplished on June 2, 1863. A woman who was born into slavery, who was beaten and worked and treated as property. A woman who escaped with nothing but her courage and determination. A woman who then returned repeatedly to slave territory to rescue others. This woman became a military strategist and combat leader. She planned an operation that involved coordinating multiple gunboats, navigating dangerous waters, avoiding mines, timing the raid for maximum effect, gathering intelligence, executing the assault, and then evacuating over 750 people under fire. Every element of this operation had to work perfectly or people would die. And it worked. Harriet executed a flawless military operation that freed more enslaved people in one night than were freed in years of Underground Railroad operations. And for over a century, this achievement was hidden, minimized, and forgotten. If this story made you angry that you weren't taught this in school, if it made you realize that everything you thought you knew about Harriet Tubman was incomplete, if it made you want to tell everyone you know about this incredible woman's military genius, then I need you to act right now. Hit that like button to help this video reach more people who need to know the full truth about Harriet Tubman. Subscribe to Crown Black Heroes and turn on notifications because every week we bring you these powerful, complete stories that history books left out. And drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Did you know about the Combahee River raid before watching this video? What other parts of Black history do you think have been sanitized or erased? How do we make sure that future generations learn the full truth about Black resistance and achievement? Share this video everywhere. Make sure everyone knows that Harriet Tubman wasn't just a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She was a spy, a military strategist, a combat leader, and the person who led the largest slave liberation in American history. Make sure her full story, her complete legacy of courage and genius and revolutionary action is known and celebrated. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for caring about historical truth and for honoring the complete legacy of one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. Harriet Tubman deserves to be remembered not as a sanitized folk hero, but as the revolutionary military leader she actually was. Share her story. Teach her story. Make sure the next generation knows that a formerly enslaved Black woman led soldiers into battle and freed 750 people in one night. That's not just history, that's legend. That's heroism at a level that demands recognition and celebration. Join me next time as we uncover another incredible story that history tried to hide. Until then, stay inspired, stay committed to truth, and keep fighting to make sure that everyone's achievements are fully recognized and celebrated. Peace.